Daddy! Daddy! No! Emma's 8-year-old voice pierced through the mechanical rumble of Thunder Mountain Railroad, her scream cutting through the Florida humidity like shattered glass. For a split second, everything stopped. The cheerful soundtrack, the excited chatter, the clicking of cameras. From the loading platform, cast member Marcus Chen saw it first. The lap bar swinging freely in the wind, no longer attached to Car 7. His training kicked in as he lunged for the emergency stop button, his voice cracking over the radio. Code V! Code V! On Thunder Mountain. Car 7. We have a rider in distress. But physics doesn't wait for emergency protocols. As the coaster train crested the third hill at 35 miles per hour, Brian Bennett's desperate grip on the side rails finally gave way. Witnesses would later describe the sound not a scream, but a father's final word carried on the wind, Emma. In the crowd below, 8-year-old Emma Bennett stood frozen, her birthday Mickey ears sliding from her head as she watched her father's body separate from the careening coaster. Her mother, Sarah's hands flew to cover her daughter's eyes, but it was too late. The image was already burned into the child's memory forever. Brian Bennett fell 47 feet in 2.3 seconds. The impact silenced the happiest place on earth. March 15, 2023. Magic Kingdom, Walt Disney World. A software engineer from Columbus, Ohio, a devoted father. A magical vacation that had been 2 years in the making. In less than 3 seconds, a mechanical failure would transform a birthday celebration into a nightmare that would shake the Disney empire to its core. Brian Bennett would never see his daughter blow out her birthday candles. You're watching When Thrills Kill. If this story grips you, subscribe, like, and share, because what you're about to discover will forever change how you look at theme park safety. Brian Bennett wasn't just another tourist at Disney World. He was a man on a mission to give his daughter Emma the most magical 8th birthday imaginable. For 2 years, he'd been planning every detail of this trip, squirreling away money from his software engineering job, researching crowd calendars, booking fast passes at exactly 60 days out. His colleagues at Columbus Tech Solutions called him Disney Dad, and Brian wore the title with pride. He had spreadsheets for everything, his wife Sarah would later recall, her voice breaking. Dining reservations, ride strategies, which characters would be where at what time. He wanted Emma to experience every ounce of magic possible. The Bennetts weren't wealthy, but Brian had saved 7-0 for this 5-day trip, working overtime and skipping his own birthday celebration to afford it. Brian's obsession with Disney wasn't new. He'd grown up in a working-class family that could never afford such vacations. His first visit came at 25, a honeymoon trip with Sarah, and he'd been captivated ever since. It was like he was making up for the childhood he never had, Sarah explained. Every trip, he became a kid again, but he also wanted to be the father who could give his children everything. This would be Emma's 3rd Disney trip, but Brian insisted each visit had to be bigger and better than the last. He'd booked character breakfasts, behind-the-scenes tours, and after-hours events. His phone contained 47 notes about surprising Emma throughout the trip. But Brian had one particular obsession, conquering every mountain in the Magic Kingdom with his daughter. Emma had finally reached the height requirement for Thunder Mountain Railroad, 40 inches exactly. Brian had been talking about this moment for months. Daddy's going to show you the wildest ride in the wilderness, he'd tell her at bedtime, making train sounds that made her giggle. He'd ridden Thunder Mountain 23 times across his various visits, often multiple times per trip. He knew every drop, every turn, every fake dynamite explosion. The morning of March 15 started perfectly. The Bennetts arrived at Magic Kingdom for rope drop, Emma wearing her special birthday button and new rainbow mini ears. Cast members sang to her at the entrance. Brian lifted her onto his shoulders as they rushed toward Fantasyland, following his meticulously planned route. By 2 p.m., they'd conquered 12 attractions, met 6 princesses, and consumed roughly their body weight in Dole Whip. He was glowing, remembered Jennifer Walsh, a family friend who joined them for the trip. Brian lived for these moments. Watching Emma's face light up at each experience, that was his drug. Photos from that morning show Brian beaming beside various attractions, always ensuring Emma was front and center, always making sure she felt like the star. At lunch in Pecos Bill's, Brian pulled out a small wrapped gift, a pin trading lanyard he'd preloaded with rare pins. Emma squealed with delight. Sarah captured the moment on video, Brian explaining how pin trading worked while Emma bounced in her seat. It was 2:15 p.m. In 45 minutes, Brian would be dead. The family made their way to Frontierland as afternoon crowds thickened. Brian had strategically saved Thunder Mountain for mid-afternoon, knowing lines would be shorter as people sought air-conditioned attractions. As they approached the attraction, Emma grabbed her father's hand. "Are you sure it's not too scary, Daddy?" Brian knelt to her level, his face serious but kind. "Remember what we always say? Bennett's a brave, and I'll be right there with you the whole time, every second." He pulled her into a hug that lasted a beat longer than usual. Later, Sarah would wonder if somehow, somewhere deep in his subconscious, he knew. They entered the queue at 2:31 p.m. Wait time, 25 minutes. Brian entertained Emma by pointing out hidden details in the elaborately themed line, the mining equipment, the backstory of the cursed mountain, the dynamite warning signs that now seem horrifically prescient. Fellow guests remembered him as energetic, engaged, the epitome of an involved father. He was teaching her the safety rules, recalled Mark Hoffman, who stood behind them in line. "Keep your hands inside. Stay seated. Hold on tight." He must have said it 5 times. He was so careful with her. The cruel irony wouldn't become apparent until later. Brian spent so much time ensuring Emma's safety that he never questioned his own. As they approached the loading platform, a cast member named Jennifer noticed Brian helping Emma practice pulling down the lap bar. He was showing her exactly how to check. It was locked, she testified. He wanted to make sure she felt secure. Brian requested row 3, his favorite spot. Not too rough in front, not too mild in back. But the grouper cast member directed them to row 7 instead. The train was almost full. Brian lifted Emma into the car first, then slid in beside her. The lap bar came down with its familiar click. Or what should have been a click. In the chaos of loading, with 24 guests boarding simultaneously, no one noticed that Car 7's bar didn't quite catch properly. No one heard the slight grinding sound that maintenance had been ignoring for weeks. "Ready for the wildest ride in the wilderness?" Brian asked Emma one last time. She nodded bravely, gripping his hand. At 2:47 p.m., Thunder Mountain Railroad dispatched from the station. Brian Bennett had exactly 2 minutes and 34 seconds left to live. Thunder Mountain Railroad opened at Magic Kingdom on September 23, 1980, as one of Disney's most ambitious attractions. The Mine Train roller coaster was designed to be thrilling but family-friendly, reaching speeds of 36 miles per hour through carefully engineered drops and turns. For 43 years, it had operated with what Disney called a stellar safety record. But beneath the meticulously maintained facade, problems were brewing. The ride system utilized a simple but effective restraint mechanism, a single lap bar that locked into place across riders' laps. Unlike modern attractions with redundant safety systems, Thunder Mountain relied on this one point of contact between guest and vehicle. The design had remained largely unchanged since 1980, with Disney citing its proven track record whenever modernization was suggested. Car 7 had a history. Maintenance logs obtained through legal discovery would later reveal 17 separate reports about that specific vehicle in the 6 months preceding Brian Bennett's death. Cast members reported unusual sounds, sticky lap bar mechanisms, and guests complaining about loose restraints. Each time, maintenance performed adjustments rather than replacements. Each time, the car went back into service within hours. Disney operates on a different plane than reality, explained former maintenance engineer Robert Sterling, who worked on Thunder Mountain from 2019 to 2022. There's immense pressure to keep attractions operational. Every minute of downtime costs thousands in lost revenue and guest satisfaction scores. So you learn to make quick fixes instead of addressing root causes. The lap bar mechanism in Car 7 contained a fatal flaw. A stress fracture had developed in the locking pin assembly, likely from millions of cycles over decades of operation. This crack, invisible to visual inspection, gradually widened with each use. Metal fatigue is insidious. The part functions normally until it catastrophically fails. Internal emails showed maintenance supervisors were aware of increasing issues with older lap bar mechanisms. A February 2023 memo recommended replacing all original restraint systems during the scheduled summer refurbishment. The response from park operations was telling: defer to 2024. Cannot afford capacity reduction during spring break season. The morning of March 15 started with what Disney called a 101 ride stoppage at 7:43 a.m. Maintenance responded to reports of a unusual grinding sound from the lift hill. They lubricated the chain mechanism and performed a standard safety check. Car 7 cycled through without passengers 5 times. The lap bar appeared to function normally. What they couldn't see was that each cycle further weakened the failing component. Weather played a role too. March in Florida brings dramatic temperature swings, causing metal components to expand and contract. The overnight low of 52 degrees, followed by afternoon highs near 85, created additional stress on aging mechanical systems. Engineers called it thermal cycling, and it accelerated metal fatigue in components already near failure. By 2 p.m., Thunder Mountain had cycled nearly 400 times that day. The attraction was operating at maximum capacity, dispatching trains every 36 seconds. In the mechanical room beneath the loading platform, bearing temperatures ran 15 degrees above normal. A sensor designed to detect anomalies had been disconnected 3 weeks earlier after producing false positive warnings. Cast member Marcus Chen later testified about his concerns that afternoon. The ride was making sounds I'd never heard before, kind of a metallic groan during dispatch. I mentioned it to the coordinator, but she said maintenance had already cleared it. The culture discouraged cast members from pushing safety concerns, especially during peak periods. The specific failure point in Car 7 was a 3-inch steel pin that secured the lap bar ratcheting mechanism. Designed to withstand 0 pounds of force, the pin had developed a crack that reduced its strength by 70%. The remaining metal could handle normal operations, barely. But any additional stress, any unusual force, would cause instantaneous failure. That additional stress came from Brian Bennett himself. At 6'2" and 215 pounds, Brian was larger than the average rider in 1980 when the restraints were designed. Modern Americans are significantly bigger than they were 40 years ago, but ride restraints hadn't been updated to accommodate changing body sizes. Brian's frame put additional pressure on the lap bar, pressure the weakened pin couldn't withstand. Video analysis would later show the exact moment of failure. As Thunder Mountain crested the third hill at 2:49:23 p.m., the train experienced a force of 2.5 Gs. The weakened pin, already stressed by Brian's size and the day's thermal cycling, finally snapped. The lap bar sprung open like a released spring. Brian Bennett suddenly found himself completely unsecured, traveling at 35 miles per hour, 47 feet above the ground. Disney's emergency response protocols were extensive but couldn't account for mechanical failure at height. By the time Marcus Chen hit the emergency stop, the train was already descending the drop. Physics took over. No amount of training or preparation could have saved Brian Bennett once that pin failed. The Thunder Mountain that thrilled millions had become a death trap, its age hidden beneath fresh paint and careful landscaping. The attraction that Disney marketed as a family adventure had failed in the most fundamental way possible. It couldn't keep a family together. Behind Disney's carefully cultivated image of perfection lay a culture that prioritized maintaining the magic above all else. This philosophy, while creating unparalleled guest experiences, also fostered an environment where safety concerns could be minimized, deferred, or outright ignored in service of the show. Former Disney executive Patricia Hayward, who oversaw park operations from 2018 to 2022, later testified about the pressure cooker environment. Every metric revolved around guest satisfaction and revenue. Safety was discussed, of course, but always in context of avoiding visible incidents that could disrupt the guest experience. A ride stopping for maintenance was seen as a failure, even if it was the right call. The rot went deeper than simple operational pressure. Disney's legendary training program, while teaching cast members to create magical moments, also indoctrinated them into a culture of silence. See something, say nothing wasn't official policy, but it was understood. Cast members who raised too many concerns found themselves reassigned to less desirable positions or pushed out entirely. Michael Torres, a former attraction supervisor, kept detailed records of his attempts to address safety concerns. His personnel file, subpoenaed during litigation, revealed a pattern: commendations for guest service followed by disciplinary actions whenever he elevated maintenance issues. "I filed 47 safety reports in my last year," Torres stated. "Management's response was to transfer me to parking operations." The message was clear. Financial pressures intensified these cultural problems. Despite its image of unlimited resources, Disney's Parks division faced constant pressure to increase profits. Maintenance budgets were scrutinized line by line. A 2022 internal audit recommended $147 million in safety upgrades across Walt Disney World's attractions. The approved budget, $23 million, with most allocated to visible improvements guests would notice. The company's approach to incident management was equally troubling. When accidents occurred, Disney's legal team mobilized immediately, not to investigate root causes, but to contain publicity damage. Victims and witnesses were offered immediate compensation in exchange for non-disclosure agreements. The Bennett tragedy wasn't Thunder Mountain's first serious incident. It was simply the first one Disney couldn't hide. In 2019, a guest named Maria Gonzalez suffered neck injuries when her lap bar partially released during operation. Disney's response was swift. Immediate medical attention, A50, zero settlement, and a comprehensive NDA. The incident never made news. The mechanical issue that caused it, the same metal fatigue affecting Car 7, went unaddressed. Whistleblowers faced systematic retaliation. James Morrison, a senior maintenance engineer, submitted a formal complaint to OSHA in January 2023 about deferred maintenance on multiple attractions. Within 2 weeks, he was terminated for performance issues, despite 15 years of exemplary reviews. His OSHA complaint was mysteriously withdrawn after Disney's lawyers contacted him. The inspection process itself was compromised. Disney's size and influence in Florida meant regulatory oversight was minimal. State inspectors, often former Disney employees, conducted cursory reviews that rarely went beyond paperwork. The phrase, "Disney will handle it," appeared repeatedly in inspection reports, deferring to the company's internal safety protocols. Those internal protocols were increasingly driven by algorithms rather than engineering judgment. Disney implemented a predictive maintenance system in 2021 that used data analytics to determine when components needed replacement. The system's fatal flaw: it based predictions on manufacturer specifications, not real-world conditions. Components rated for 20 years were kept in service that long, regardless of actual wear. Cost-cutting measures extended throughout the maintenance department. Experienced engineers were replaced with younger, cheaper technicians. Overnight maintenance windows were shortened to allow extended park hours. Original manufacturer parts were substituted with equivalent, alternatives that met specifications on paper but failed faster in practice. The human cost of these decisions was carefully hidden. Between 2020 and 2023, Disney World experienced 731 reported incidents requiring medical attention. Only 12 made local news. The rest were handled quietly, victims compensated and silenced. Emergency responders were trained to use unmarked entrances, avoiding guest areas. Ambulances idled backstage, invisible to the Magical Kingdom's visitors. Training documentation revealed the depth of the cover-up culture. New cast members were taught to preserve the show above all else. If a guest was injured, the first priority was moving them backstage. If an attraction malfunctioned, the goal was resuming operations quickly. Safety wasn't ignored, but it was always balanced against the imperative to maintain the illusion. Even attraction design reflected these priorities. Emergency stops and safety systems were hidden from guest view, making it harder for visitors to report concerns. Warning signs were minimized to avoid disturbing the theme. Safety announcements were delivered in character, prioritizing entertainment over clarity. The Bennett tragedy exposed this carefully constructed facade. For the first time, Disney couldn't control the narrative. Too many witnesses, too much video footage, too public a failure. The company that had spent decades convincing the world it was the safest place on Earth suddenly faced questions it couldn't answer with marketing magic. In the days following Brian's death, former employees began speaking out. The tales they told painted a picture of an organization that had lost its way, prioritizing profits over the very families it claimed to serve. The Magic Kingdom's dark reality was finally exposed to the Florida sun. At 2:47 p.m. on March 15, 2023, Thunder Mountain Railroad's train 2 departed the loading station with 24 guests aboard, including Brian and Emma Bennett, in Car 7. The first minutes of the ride proceeded normally, the climb up the first lift hill, Emma gripping her father's hand as the chain lift clanked beneath them. Brian pointed out the animatronic animals, keeping his daughter distracted from the height. "Look, there's the goat," he said, following the script he'd used on dozens of previous rides. Emma giggled, her earlier nervousness fading. She didn't notice her father subtly checking the lap bar, pushing down to ensure it was secure. The bar moved slightly, more than it should have, but Brian attributed it to normal play in the mechanism. As they crested the first drop, Emma squealed with delight. The train plunged into the mountain's interior, banking through artificial caverns filled with glowing minerals and mining equipment. Brian raised his hands on the smaller drops, encouraging Emma to do the same. She was too scared at first, but his confidence was infectious. At 2:48:17, they emerged from the first cave system onto the outdoor portion of the track. This was Brian's favourite part, the view across Frontierland, the feeling of freedom as the train curved around the mountain's exterior. He didn't know that beneath them, the stressed pin in their lap bar mechanism was down to its final millimeters of intact metal. The second lift hill brought new challenges. The lap bar shifted noticeably as the train angled upward. Brian pushed it down again, harder this time. It seemed to catch, but the clicking sound was wrong, metallic and sharp, rather than the solid thunk of proper engagement. Emma, lost in the experience, didn't notice her father's growing concern. Marcus Chen, operating the ride from Tower 1, performed his routine visual check as Train 2 passed. Everything appeared normal from his vantage point. He couldn't see Brian's white knuckles as he gripped the lap bar, couldn't hear the subtle grinding of metal on metal as the damaged mechanism struggled to hold. At 2:49:20, Thunder Mountain reached the apex of its third and highest hill. For a moment, the train paused at the crest, giving riders a spectacular view before the climactic plunge. In that instant of weightlessness, the physics changed. The upward force on riders' bodies momentarily exceeded the downward pressure of the restraints. The weakened pin, already compressed beyond its limits, experienced a reversal of forces. The metallurgical failure was instantaneous and complete. The pin sheared cleanly in half, with a sound like a snapped pencil, insignificant against the roar of the coaster and screams of delight from other riders. Brian felt the lap bar release immediately. His stomach lurched as the safety device that should have held him secure swung upward, no longer connected to anything. His hands instinctively shot out, left hand death gripping the side of the car, right arm wrapping protectively around Emma, pulling her against him even as his own body began to lift. "Daddy!" Emma's scream cut through everything as she felt her father's body shifting, rising. The train was already tilting into the 47-foot drop, accelerating toward 35 miles per hour. Physics was merciless. Brian's 215-pound frame, no longer restrained, began separating from the vehicle. For 1.3 seconds, Brian Bennett fought gravity with pure paternal instinct. His left hand clawed at the car's interior, fingernails breaking against fiberglass. His right arm remained locked around Emma, ensuring she stayed secure even as his own position became impossible. Witnesses would later describe his face in that moment, not fear for himself, but desperate determination to protect his daughter. Marcus Chen saw it happen from Tower 1. The sight of a rider, half standing, clearly unsecured, triggered every alarm in his training. His hand slammed the emergency stop button at 2:49:24, even as his voice cracked over the radio. But emergency stops take time. Momentum carries forward. The train was already in the dive. At 2:49:25, Brian Bennett's grip failed. The separation was almost graceful, witnesses said. One moment he was there, the next he wasn't. His body rotated backward as it fell, arms still outstretched, as if reaching for the train, for Emma, for any salvation. Several guests captured the moment on video, their vacation memories transformed into evidence. Emma's scream changed pitch, from surprise to pure terror, as she watched her father disappear. Her small hands reached out, grabbing only empty air where he'd been. In the car behind them, Jennifer Walsh lunged forward, wrapping her arms around the hysterical child, holding her in place as the train continued its now horrific journey. Brian fell 47 feet in 2.3 seconds. Park guests below scattered in panic as they realized what was happening above them. A family from Germany barely avoided the impact zone, the father pulling his children back as Brian's body struck the concrete pathway with a sound that silenced the entire area. The emergency stop engaged at 2:40, 9, 30, 1, bringing the train to a jarring halt halfway down the drop. 23 riders found themselves stranded at a severe angle, Emma Bennett's screams echoing across the park. "Daddy! Daddy! Where's my daddy?" Cast members would later describe it as the worst sound they'd ever heard. Emergency response was swift but futile. 2 off-duty EMTs in the park reached Brian within 90 seconds. The trauma was catastrophic: skull fractures, internal bleeding, multiple organ failure. They began CPR anyway, knowing it was hopeless, but needing to try. A crowd gathered, phones recording despite cast members' attempts to create barriers. Sarah Bennett was waiting at the ride exit, expecting to photograph her family's triumphant emergence. Instead, she heard Emma's screams over the ride speakers. Marcus Chen had forgotten to cut the audio in his panic. She began running toward the entrance as sirens wailed in the distance. The ride evacuation took 47 minutes. Fire department ladder trucks carefully removed each rider from the stopped train. Emma had to be physically pried from Jennifer Walsh's protective embrace, screaming for her daddy the entire time. When they finally reunited her with Sarah, the child was nearly catatonic, unable to process what she'd witnessed. At 3:17 p.m., Brian Bennett was pronounced dead at the scene. The Orange County coroner would list the cause as multiple trauma injuries consistent with a fall from height. What the clinical language couldn't capture was the final word. Witnesses heard him speak as he fell. Emma. The aftermath was swift and chaotic. Magic Kingdom closed Thunder Mountain immediately and evacuated Frontierland. By evening, they'd shut down the entire park, out of respect for the family. Social media exploded with witness videos, each angle more horrific than the last. Disney's PR machine, so effective at controlling narratives, found itself overwhelmed by the raw reality of citizen journalism. The Bennett family's vacation ended in the most nightmarish way imaginable. Sarah and Emma flew home to Ohio the next day, Brian's body following separately. The daughter who'd woken up that morning, excited about her birthday adventure, went to sleep that night, an orphan of Disney's darkest day. Within 48 hours, the videos had been viewed over 100 million times. The image of Brian Bennett's final moment, arms outstretched, falling through space, became the symbol of corporate negligence that no amount of Disney magic could erase. The company that promised to be the place where dreams come true had delivered a nightmare that would haunt a little girl forever. Thunder Mountain Railroad would never reopen. The attraction that had thrilled millions became a monument to the moment when mechanical failure met corporate indifference, and a father's last act was ensuring his daughter's safety even as he fell to his death. In the end, Brian Bennett was what he'd always been, a protective father. Even in those final 2.3 seconds, His only thought was Emma. The lawsuits began within days. The investigations would reveal decades of deferred maintenance, ignored warnings, and systemic failures. But for Emma Bennett, none of that mattered. All she knew was that she'd gone to the happiest place on earth with her daddy and come home without him. She never wore her Mickey ears again.